Patty, you're muted.
Thank you, ma'am. And good afternoon. Welcome to our virtual event, Be More Prepared for Urban Flooding. And today we're going to have several guest speakers. And flooding in urban areas like Baltimore City can be caused by flash flooding, coastal flooding, river floods, or by rapid runoff of water. It can occur suddenly, and it can cause significant damage to homes and businesses. Today, we will discuss some of the flooding issues that have impacted Baltimore City. We're going to discuss flood insurance, flood mitigation, the Be More alert system, flood damaged vehicles, and we're going to have disaster preparedness tips for seniors. We have an amazing panel of speakers today from Baltimore City Department of Planning, the Maryland Department of Environment, Baltimore City Emergency Management, the Maryland Insurance Administration, and Baltimore City Department of Health. Phones and computers will be on mute for this event. After our speakers have presented today, after all speakers have presented, there will be a Q&A session. If you have questions throughout the event, please type your questions into the chat box. There's a chat box and a Q&A box, so please make sure that those questions end up in the chat box. The default is set to everyone, so please leave it as the default set to everyone. If you do have a question for a speaker and you know which speaker it is, please write the speaker's name or their agency with your question. I'll be back at the end of the session to do the Q&A. So before we start today, we have a special guest. It's Baltimore City Council Member Christopher Burnett. Mr. Burnett is a lifelong Baltimorean who lives in Southwest Baltimore. His journey into community organizing began while watching his grandmother organize her neighbors in an effort to save their neighborhood from the expansion of Johns Hopkins Hospital. And he carried those lessons with him as a college undergrad, serving as founding member of the student-led social justice organization, Community Roots. After earning his master's degree, Mr. Burnett was hired as community organizer for the Service Employee International Union's Good Jobs Better Baltimore campaign. The campaign pushed for livable wages, corporate accountability, and increased investment in our communities. Welcome, Mr. Burnett.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to welcome. Thank you all for joining. This is such an important and timely conversation to be had around urban flooding and how do we prepare for that. Just 2 years ago, several neighborhoods in the district I represent, which covers Southwest Baltimore and part of Northwest Baltimore, experienced 200-year flood events within 3 months of each other, one in May, one in July, and we were not prepared for this at all. And it really showed that there was a lot of work that needed to be done to educate communities on the importance of things like flood insurance, or making sure that they were signed up for the city's alert system, that they knew about the just general topography of the communities that they live in, and the propensity for flooding or the probability of flooding. But most importantly, it really started an important conversation for us in Southwest Baltimore on how do we continue to stay prepared? How do we continue to get the word out to communities? I do want to send a huge thank you to the Baltimore Office of Sustainability and the Planning Commission, fire department, and all of the city agencies that were very integral in not only helping our communities recover from the flood, but you all have continued to keep your foot on the gas and continue to push on the education front and communication front to make sure that residents not only in Southwest Baltimore, but across the city of Baltimore are prepared for what can be our new reality. We're a coastal city, we're right on the water, and this is unfortunately, as we move into a world where these sort of flood events and rain events become a new normal, that we are all prepared and ready to protect our families, to protect our homes, and also know that the city is working diligently diligently and working hard every day to make sure that we are making improvements to our infrastructure so that we can prevent these kind of things moving forward. And so I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. I think it's going to be a really incredible learning opportunity for all of you who have joined us today. Please don't stop here. Make sure that you sign up for the city's alert system, that you check your insurance plans, and we're going to learn a lot about that today, and that you stay engaged with the planning departments and Office of Sustainability's efforts moving forward, so that we all are a safer city and our families are safe, and that we are prepared for this new world that we're in. So thank you for the opportunity to say hello, and I'm looking forward to the presentations.
Thank you for that, Councilmember Burnett. And with that, Joyce Peach is going to introduce our speakers today.
Thank you, Patty. First up, we have Bruna Attila from the Baltimore City Department of Planning.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Bruna Attila. I'm the coastal planner and one of the city's floodplain managers with the Baltimore Office of Sustainability. Thank you again for joining us for this flood preparedness webinar. It's very important to the city that our residents are well informed and prepared for the possibility of flood events. Next slide, please. Great. So I wanted to start this presentation by showing you that Baltimore City, like most jurisdictions across the country, is located within an interjurisdictional watershed. And by that, I mean that water, including rainwater, that ends up in the streams and rivers, and as we know, even streets of Baltimore City, may have originated in a different county. And as you see on the map, the areas that drain to the bay, which are the colored areas on the map, also include areas outside of the boundaries of Baltimore City. But those waters do go through Baltimore City before they reach the bay. Next slide, please. And here is the floodplain map of Baltimore City. So FEMA, which stands for the Federal Emergency Management Agency, prepares floodplain maps and supplies them to all jurisdictions in the country that participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. For short, we call that the NFIP. And based on the maps provided by FEMA, Baltimore City regulates all development and construction that happens within the regulatory floodplain, which are the colored areas that you see on the map. And those colored areas represent both the 1% and the 0.2% annual chance of flood areas. So the 1% and the 0.2% areas are formerly known as the 100 and the 500-year floodplains, but we are trying to move away from that language, because by saying the 100-year floodplain, people may think that a flood of that size could only happen once every 100 years, when in reality, there's a 1% chance that a flood of that size could happen every single year. So I also wanted to mention that Baltimore has a few types of flood sources. Riverine and tidal flooding are the two main sources of flooding included in the regulatory floodplain, which again is the map that you see on the screen. So for background, riverine flooding happens usually near rivers or streams when water goes beyond riverbanks, causing flooding. And tidal flooding happens near the bay because of storm surge caused by hurricanes, tropical storms, or because of extreme high tide events. But we know that different areas in the city also experience other types of flooding, including flooding from stormwater runoff, flooding caused by water main breaks, especially during the winter months, urban flooding, nuisance flooding, and flooding caused by sewer backups. So that's why it's really important that everyone in the city should consider purchasing flood insurance, because we know that floods do not only happen in the regulatory floodplain. Next slide, please. So when a jurisdiction decides to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, its residents are eligible to purchase flood insurance that is subsidized by the federal government. But in turn, the jurisdiction must enforce floodplain standards for development that happens in those regulated floodplains. So the minimum requirement that FEMA requires is the regulation of the 1% annual chance of flood areas, which again, formerly known as the 100-year floodplain. But in Baltimore, we go beyond that minimum requirement and require higher standards from development that happens both in the 1% and in the 0.2% flood areas. We also have a freeboard requirement, which is really an additional 2 feet of elevation over the possible height of floods or floodwaters as provided to us by FEMA. And the enforcement of the requirements is done through the permit system. So as you know, all work that is done to any structure anywhere in the city requires a permit. And the floodplain requirements are triggered when a homeowner or a business owner who owns property in the regulatory floodplain applies for a permit. So once that happens, the construction is required to comply with current floodplain requirements. And that is done, of course, not only for compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program, but also so that structures located in the regulatory floodplain are better prepared and have a better chance to resist to flood damage that may be caused by floodwaters. Let's see, yeah, next slide, please. So, and because Baltimore has adopted those additional floodplain requirements, we participate in FEMA's Community Rating System program. So the CRS program rewards jurisdictions like Baltimore that go the extra mile, trying to make our floodplain areas more resilient and better prepared against flood damage. So the CRS program has 10 classes, where 1 is the highest class. And the closer to a class 1, the greater the discount a jurisdiction would have on flood insurance rates. So Baltimore currently is a class 5, which means that city residents are eligible for a 10% or a 25% discount on flood insurance rates, depending on the location of the property in the city. So properties located in the 1% annual chance of flood area is eligible for a 25% discount on flood insurance, and properties located anywhere else in the city are eligible for a 10% discount on flood insurance. And I would like to mention that the highest CRS class in the state of Maryland is a class 5, which is only held by Baltimore City and Prince George's County. So we are just very proud of that. Next slide, please. So it's also very important that everyone in the city knows and are aware of their flood risk. So the city has an online tool that helps residents define their flood risks. You can access the Baltimore City Cold Map website to find out if your home or business is located in the regulatory floodplain. So you can go to that, again, website. You can type that cells.baltimorehousing.org/coldmap V2EXT, or you can use any internet search tool, type Baltimore City Cold Map. That should be taking you to that website. Can we go to the next slide, please? As I'll tell you how to look for that floodplain layer. So when you go to Baltimore City Cold Map, you would go up on the screen. If you see that little circle with what looks like a little stack of papers, click on that and you activate the layer list. Then you scroll down, select city program boundaries, and then within that selection, you click on floodplain. Then those purple shades should be displayed on your screen. That signifies the regulatory floodplain, and it would show your flood risk. It's not showing here on the screen, but on the top left of the website, there's a search box where you can type your address and click search, and the website will take you to the location where you're trying to define the flood risk. And for the legend, as you see there, well, it's still using the wrong language there, 100-year floodplain and 500-year floodplain. I need to correct that stuff on the website. But those signify, so the darker shade of purple signifies the 1% chance area, and the lighter purple is the 0.2% or the 500-year floodplain. And this is, if you could go to the next slide, please. Great. And if you have trouble accessing the website, or if you don't have good access to the internet, you can always reach out to us, to the Office of Sustainability. You can send us an email at sustainability@baltimorecity.gov, or reach out to us by phone, 410-396-7526. Ask to speak to one of our floodplain managers. We will be happy to inform you of the flood risk of your home or business. We can supply you with a map. So we are happy to also provide that service to you if you reach out to us. And this is all that I have for you today, and I will be turning the ball to Kevin Wagner.
Thank you, Bruna. Next up, we have Kevin Wagner from the Maryland Department of the Environment.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Bruna. I'm Delighted to be here. I appreciate the opportunity that Maryland Insurance Administration and our other partners, including the city, helped to put this on. My name again is Kevin Wagner, and I'm a Community Assistance Program Manager with Maryland Department of the Environment. Next slide. A little bit about our department. So we have over 900 employees that help to protect Maryland's air, water, and land resources. Our secretary is Ben Grumbles, and Deputy Secretary is Horacio Tablada. But our mission is really to protect and restore the environment for the health and well-being of all Marylanders. So I play a small role in that on the floodplain management side. Next slide. So specifically, I deal with what Bruna referred to as the NFIP, or the National Flood Insurance Program. It is a national program that works with states and local governments to set up floodplain management programs in their specific communities. It started in 1968. It is administered by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, but really it's implemented locally by communities like Baltimore City. So we're in that mix to help them implement those programs and answer questions and participate in public outreach opportunities like this. So majority of the benefits are insurance related, but there are a lot of other tentacles involved with disaster response and things like that. Next slide. So there are three main components of the National Flood Insurance Program, and Bruna already did a good job talking about the mapping information and how FEMA identifies some of that high-risk area. So what I'm going to do is kind of focus more on this other piece and talk a little bit about reducing your risk or mitigating your risk and insuring your property. So the flood insurance and flood mitigation aspects. Next. So what are the causes of flooding in Baltimore? Bruna again listed a couple of these, but just keep scrolling through if you don't mind. We got stormwater runoff, which a notion that we're hearing more and more about urban flooding. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Bruna mentioned, nor'easters and hurricanes and tropical storms, but we also have high tides. Sometimes you might notice an extra high tide called a king tide that floods the downtown area. But we kind of classify some of these into a category called nuisance flooding that creates a public inconvenience. There are also other things going on out there with regards to sea level rise and land subsiding and things like that. And riverine flash flooding due to extreme precipitation, stormwater runoff, etc. And other types of flooding, which we'll hit on quickly, including water main breaks and sewer backups. Next. So urban flooding is probably not new to a lot of you. You've seen this happen in areas that are probably not directly located near a flooding source. But anytime you have a lot of impervious surface, the storm drains are not able to convey that water out to the respective flood source, it starts to back up. Things start to flood. Cars are stuck. Cars get damaged. Next. The other common flood we deal with a lot are nuisance flooding, and these are more in our tidal and coastal areas, but it is high tide flooding that causes a public inconvenience due to a variety of reasons. Could be a combination of rain and high tide. Next. But we also see in Baltimore City, as I reported from found in an old news source here on YouTube from CBS, there are water main breaks. I think this particular one, there was a 42-inch main that broke. And while you wouldn't traditionally think of that as a flood, on the insurance side, if it floods two different properties, it is a coverable loss. So in this specific example, we have the city property being the road and then the private property adjacent to that. Next. So what can you do about it? What are ways that you can reduce your flood risk? Well, think about when you're doing renovation projects, for example. Instead of putting things back exactly the same way, if you know you're in a high-risk area after looking at the maps or having lived through a flood, consider rebuilding with flood damage-resistant materials. Don't use things like drywall, and I'll give you some examples in a bit. If we have elevated structures and enclosures below those elevated structures, use these things called flood openings. Install backflow prevention valves in our sewer lines and things like that. Elevate exterior utilities and interior. Anchor fuel tanks, including our oil and propane tanks. And let's not forget about those accessory structures outside that can easily be lifted up. Let's anchor those and also install flood openings in those. But there's a variety of mitigation measures, this little acronym FRED, flood-proof, relocate, elevate, and demolish. But flood insurance, purchasing that can really be a helpful tool for you to help recover faster. Next. So materials, what are we talking about? So don't use your traditional drywall. Don't use your traditional insulation. Pick materials that if they are submerged for long periods of time, you can hose them off and reuse them and get back to where you were. So, carpeting, fiberglass insulation, that kind of thing just doesn't work out well. Consider instead cement board, brick, marine grade plywood, sprayed polyurethane foam for insulation. Next. Flood openings, again, are these things you install in elevated structures. So usually if the home's being built, it's elevated above the predicted elevation, but it's very important to have these openings to reduce hydrostatic pressure on the wall to prevent collapse. Next. Just more examples of how these openings prevent or balance those flood loads. You want them lower to the ground. You want them within 1 foot of ground. You don't want them high up like your traditional air vent would be, but these can help you on the flood insurance rating side as well. Next. The other thing we talked about are backflow prevention valves. So installing something maybe on your side of the line, the property line, so to prevent a water and sewer from backing up into your home during a flood event. Next. This is just an example of an exterior HVAC unit being elevated on a platform. Not always has to be this high, but this particular flood elevation is very deep in this particular area. And you can also see the flood openings. Next. Utilities, elevating them is one opportunity. In this particular example, they have a block platform. So think about your basement, your hot water heaters, your furnace. If there's a way to get that up and off the ground. Next. But you can also, if you can't move it, there are opportunities where you could potentially dry floodproof it. You could brick in a barrier around these areas and have a latching door that has a gasket that prevents water from going in. So there are different ways to accomplish this. Next. Fuel tanks, we can't forget about those. Often they end up in the basement, the oil tanks especially. And if those become, if floodwaters enter the basement area and they float, then they tip over and cause all kinds of problems. The oil spills out. So anchoring those and extending the vent pipes are important. Next. So we commonly see propane tanks on the outside, so those need to be anchored, and they could be anchored with ground anchors. Next. Or heating oil tanks, and these are inside and outside, but this particular example is outside because we're using ground anchors. But like I showed in the first example, you could anchor them to concrete as well. Next. And let's not forget about the sheds. So, anchoring those to the ground, elevating any utilities that are serving those accessory structures, installing flood openings are all important. Next. Insurance. So first and foremost, check with your agent. But understand with flood insurance, there is both building and contents coverage. So that means property owners, renters, and business owners can purchase flood insurance, but understand the difference between the building coverage and actual contents coverage. But since Baltimore City participates in the program, it's available to anybody in the community. Doesn't matter if you're in a high-risk area or not. And homeowners insurance does not usually cover flood damage. And you can, like I said, purchase it even if you're in a low-risk area. We call it a preferred risk policy area. Usually it comes into play when you're going through a loan closing process and your lender requires you to carry it as part of that mandatory purchase requirement. Next. So some basics here is usually you buy flood insurance through an insurer you typically deal with, like Allstate, Nationwide. These are called write your own companies that write the policy on behalf of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. But coverage maxes out for residential at $250,000. And for commercial, it maxes out for building coverage at $500,000. You can see the differences in contents coverage as well. So for residential and contents coverage, you max out at $100,000, and for non-residential, also $500,000. But there's a variety of factors that go into it: the zone, the elevation, construction type, when it was built, and things like that, and also deductible. Next. Usually it takes 30 days for a policy to go into effect. There are some exceptions. If you are going through a loan closing process or something like that. But just understand it might take some time. But read the policy most importantly. Next. Great publications out there that we'll be sending the slide deck out, but the one I just wanted to highlight next is this Protect Your Home from Flooding, some low-cost things you can do yourself. So we didn't talk about this, but things like installing rain barrels, cleaning out your gutters, these are great things that you can do as community-wide projects that helps reduce the amount of water, but there are also a lot of things that we covered today that you can do inside your home. So this is a great resource. You can Google it. We'll be sending this link out. Next. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next, we have Crystal Bright from the Baltimore City Office of Emergency Management.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm here from the Office of Emergency Management. I am Deputy Preparedness of Preparedness here. Deputy of Preparedness here at OEM. Next, please. So the topics of discussion that we will talk about is the role that OEM takes in Baltimore, the Be More Alert system, flood preparedness for renters, what to do before a flood damages your apartment, and what to do if and when a flood damage occurs. We will also discuss the role in Baltimore. So we provide field response to all major incidents and emergencies around the city on a 24-hour basis. We also offer logistical and tactile support to first responders during incidents, which basically we provide resources to them in the field. We also help to develop emergency plans for the city. And we maintain preparedness among Baltimore citizens, workers, and visitors. I go out into the field and do preparedness events at markets and schools and things like that to help residents be more, make sure they're ready in case of an emergency. Next, please. So the Be More Alert system is a notification system and that sends out various emergency alerts to communities about severe weather, flooding, hazardous chemical releases, infectious disease outbreaks, any criminal activities, and evacuations. To sign up for this, you can go to this link, emergency.baltimorecity.gov/BeMoreAlert, and you can sign up for this here. You have to be city resident. Alerts can be sent out to citywide or specific geo-targeted areas. So prevention and planning, we recommend that renters sign up for insurance, and it could be inexpensive. You can ask your insurance agent about possible discount programs such as bundling or through the National Flood Insurance Program. You can keep an inventory of items stored in your basement. You even take pictures and upload them and save them onto a thumb drive. Try not to store the items on the floor. We saw previous pictures of shelving outside of the house to keep the items off of the ground, and shelving inside to move them off of the floor. Next, please. So we will discuss here flood prevention and planning inside and outside of your rental. So these items you can discuss with getting from your landlord, which is installing a sump pump. If you're a renter, you could also request annual plumbing inspections. Also, report all observed possible points of flooding. And you could also have someone experienced do to help with that also, and photograph any flooding as it occurs. And it's good to arrange outdoor landscape away from the home, not towards it, since the soil tends to absorb much of the water. Check gutters and basement entry drains prior to all anticipated storms and on a regular basis. Next, please. Thank you. How to clean up after a flood. So wearing personal protective equipment, also PPE, to protect yourself prior to entering your home. Take out, document, and toss all flood exposed items which didn't dry out within 24 to 48 hours. Open your window and doors to air out your apartment or home. Once it is considered safe, you could use fans to help air out your home. And please do not mix cleaning products, especially bleach and ammonia. Clean surfaces with water and detergent. Remove any visible mold. Do not cover it up. Covering up does not make it go away. Dry a home as soon as possible, and get your HVAC, which is your cooling system, inspected by a professional, and mold clean up prior to turning it back on. Get them to clean out the mold and before turning it back on, because that could blow out air that's not healthy for you to breathe in. So we will next talk about the getting things prepared and getting back to life as normal. So after a flood, you will sort out the items for insurance claims. It's also good to have insurance papers in a safety box, and to conduct a close review of the terms of your lease. Document the damage, photograph all damaged items, film a walkthrough of your home to establish what damage accrued to your property versus the landlord's property, which is the carpet and the walls. Save all items until approved to toss by insurance agency.
Thank you, Crystal. Next up, we have Kiana Walton from the Maryland Insurance Administration.
Good afternoon. I'm Kiana Walton. I'm with the Consumer Education and Advocacy Unit of the Maryland Insurance Administration. And I'm going to just talk about understanding your insurance coverage when it comes to a disaster. Next slide. So we're going to talk about what is the Maryland Insurance Administration, how we can help, coverage to protect you if your automobile sustains a loss due to the flooding, and what to do after a loss. So first, I'm going to tell you about the Maryland Insurance Administration. So the Maryland Insurance Administration is the state agency that regulates the business of insurance in Maryland. So that means we license insurers, which are the insurance companies, and insurance producers, also known as agents and brokers. We examine the business practice of licensees to ensure compliance. So we make sure that companies are complying with Maryland law. We monitor the solvency of insurance companies, so we make sure that they're able to pay claims. We review and approve insurance policy forms. So any forms or policies that are sold in the state of Maryland are reviewed by our office. And we review rates to be sure that they are not inadequate, excessive, or unfairly discriminatory. We also investigate consumer and provider complaints and allegations of fraud. Next slide. So if you feel that your insurance company or insurance producer have acted improperly, you have the right to file a complaint, and that would be with our office. So if you are denied or delayed payment of all or portions of a claim, you are improperly terminated by your insurance company, raised your insurance premiums without proper notice or in excess of what the law allows, they made false statements to you in connection with the sale of insurance or processing your claim, or they overcharge you for the services, including premium finance charges, you are able to file a complaint with our office. Next slide. So I'm going to basically go over automobile coverage when it comes to a storm or flood damage. So you want to know, do you have the right automobile coverage for a flood? When it comes to automobile insurance coverage, comprehensive coverage provides you the coverage for property damage to your insured vehicle resulting from the occurrence of the following: flooding, theft, vandalism, glass breakage, not from the result of an accident, or your vehicle striking an animal. If you only have liability coverage, your insurer will not pay for the claim. For these situations, it would have to be comprehensive coverage. Comprehensive coverage is not mandated in the state of Maryland, but if you do have a car loan, it will be required by the loan office. Next slide. So you want to review your policy to determine what is covered and what is not covered, so what is excluded. You may want to ask these questions to your insurance company or insurance producer or agent. What types of damages are covered? How long will it take to process my claim? Will I need to obtain estimates for repairs? And will filing a claim under my comprehensive coverage raise my premium? Next slide. This is an example of your declaration page. So you're given this by your insurance company, which lets you know what's covered, what's not covered, as well as your deductibles and anything else in reference to your policy. So comprehensive coverage, as you see, is circled here in yellow, and you will see that you have that coverage because you will see a deductible associated with it. Also, your policy provides a certain period of time for you to notify them if you do have a claim. So you want to make sure you read your policy. Next slide. So if your vehicle has suffered flood damage, it is important to file your claim as soon as possible. It is also good for you to take photos or videos of the damage. So taking your phone and just video recording or taking pictures of it so that you have proof to show the insurance company. Take all of the necessary steps to prevent mold or mildew from developing in your car. So for example, you can properly dry out your vehicle to prevent mold or mildew, or your insurance company may choose to pay for the cleaning before they look at it to look at any other damages. Next slide. So your insurer may tell you to take your vehicle or have your vehicle towed to a body shop where you will receive an estimate of the amount of damage to the vehicle. You have the right to select the repair facility where your vehicle will be repaired. Your insurer may send an adjuster to assess the damage. And if your car floats away, you can contact the police department to see if your car has been recovered. Next slide. So now what if a tree falls on your vehicle? If a tree or limb has fallen on your car, this damage would also likely be covered under your comprehensive coverage, and it may also be subject to a deductible. So if the tree is on the property of another, such as on your neighbor's property or on public property, the owner of the tree is generally not responsible for the damage. I know a lot of people get upset when they hear that, but unless the tree was a hazard or prior to the loss and the owner should have known and failed to take action, will then that owner be held liable for the tree? Next slide. So what happens if your insurer decides that your vehicle is a total loss? If you purchase comprehensive coverage and your vehicle is determined to be a total loss, your insurer will make a settlement offer reflecting the actual cash value of the vehicle immediately prior to the loss. You will also be responsible for paying your deductible. Next slide. So if your vehicle is claimed or deemed a total loss, that would be because the cost to repair the vehicle is 75% or greater than the fair market value of the vehicle immediately prior to the loss. Your insurer is permitted to add additional costs, such as the cost of the rental vehicle and potential hidden damages to the cost to repair your vehicle when calculating the 75% value. Next slide. So your insurer generally has 10 days to offer a cash settlement to you. The insurer may include all taxes and registration fees in the cash settlement offer. The offer from the insurer may be an amount that reflects the retail value for a similar motor vehicle and they use a nationally recognized valuation manual or computerized data bank or a quote from a substantially similar motor vehicle from a qualified dealer at a location reasonably convenient to the claimant to come up with the actual price. Next slide. So you may request the following in writing from the insurance company: the settlement offer, the explanation of the method that they use to arrive at the offer, the detailed explanation of the calculation of the motor vehicle's total loss value, including the calculation of any value added to the motor vehicle by options, a list of all the deductions that will be made from the value of the motor vehicle, and a copy of the inspection guidelines relied on to determine the condition of the value at the time of the loss. The insurance company is required by law to respond within 7 business days of your request. Next slide. So now you're at the settlement offer. If you think your car is worth more than what the insurer has offered, you can negotiate with your insurance company. It's important to know that you must provide supporting documentation for your counteroffer. You can do this by getting quotes from car dealers or viewing prices and ads online for similar vehicles. Next slide. So some things to remember. If your insurer denies any part of your claim, be sure they put the denial in writing and you keep a copy of all the paperwork. Insurers consider loss history and claim frequency when making a decision on whether they will insure you, renew your policy, and the cost of your policy. So you want to, again, make sure that you know your rights when you are dealing with claims with your insurance company. Next slide. And if you have any questions, concerns, or any complaints with your insurance company, you can contact us directly, as well as use our website where we have complaint forms online that you can fill out. And that would be at www.insurance.maryland.gov. Next slide. And a few publications that we have available on our website that would be good for homeowners, renters, to review, as well as people that own auto insurance to review on your own. Next slide. And thank you.
Thank you, Kiana. And finally, we have Bridget Wright from the Baltimore City Health Department.
To be here today. This is a much needed event, and I'm glad to be here along with Molly Martin to represent the health department. Okay, next please. How can I switch? Okay, first, like I said, my name is Bridget. I am the health educator for the Office of Public Health Preparedness and Response here at the Health Department. So part of what I do is go into the community and talk about preparing for emergencies, such as this one we're having here today, this discussion. And the time to prepare is now, because the next event will happen. It is only a matter of time. Next. So you want to create a plan for emergencies because the next event will happen. So when you do create that plan, you want to talk about your plan with a close friend or relative. That way they will be able to point out any holes that you have in your emergency plan and help you to kind of just adjust that plan accordingly. Next. Next slide, please. So you want to connect with other seniors because there is strength in numbers. You want to connect and share the information about your emergency plan with the seniors where you live or just people that you know. Determine how you will get to an alternate location in the event you have to evacuate. Let's just say we have some massive flood event and you have to evacuate wherever it is that you are staying at that moment. You want to make sure that if you do not drive, you have partnered with someone who does drive so you can get to a safe location. Also, you can partner with friends, of course, family members, or even partner with some of the people where you live, and if you live in a senior building, or with other people that you know. And you want to set this up ahead of time So when that event happens, the plan will go into motion. Next, please. So you want to have a personal preparedness plan, an emergency plan. So creating a personal preparedness plan in the event you have to shelter in place, meaning that you would have to take shelter right where you are. If an emergency happens like today, I would have to take shelter right here at work. If that is what is the announcement, take shelter where you are, or you may have to take shelter at your home or evacuate to an alternate location. So you want to have an emergency kit. And one of the things that people will say, how many emergency kits should I have? More than one, especially if you drive. So you want to purchase a few items each time you go to the grocery. You do not have to purchase all these items at once. Each time you go, pick up a couple cans of canned goods, whether it's soup, whether it's beans, whether it's nuts. Pick up a few items each time you go to the grocery. So that you can make an emergency kit for your home, and if you drive, to keep one in your vehicle. Next. So what we have here at the Health Department is a document. It's called Plan 9, and it lists the essential items in an emergency kit. And of course, numero uno is water. You can live much longer without food than without water. And then it lists 9 of the essential items in a kit. So we're going to go through those items briefly. Next, please. So, of course, water. We can, like I said, we can live much longer without food than without water. The recommended amount is 1 gallon per person per day for 3 days. However, because of COVID have caused a number of items to fly off our shelves earlier this year. So it would be wise to increase your water supply to at least 2 weeks supply or more if you can. We do not know how long we're going to be in the house if an epic event happens. So you want to make sure that you have enough water. Whether you boil your water, whether you buy bottled water, just make sure that you are storing water. I actually have some empty bottles that each time I go to the grocery, I actually fill it up there because it has one of those units that you can fill up your water when you go to the grocery. Next, please. And of course, food include canned foods, dry goods. Like I said, you do not have to purchase all these items at one time. Just pick up some each time you go. Make sure that you are checking the expiration dates on the items that you already have and replace those items accordingly. Include nuts, also flour, because guess what? If you don't have any bread, if you have flour, you can make your own bread or some version of it. Next, please. Clothes and footwear include a complete change of clothing and sturdy footwear and rainwear in your kit. You also want to include things like large garbage bags because if nothing else, if you forgot your raincoat, you can always make one with the large garbage bag. So if you have the members of your household, also they can have their own emergency bag so that you don't have to put everything in just one bag. Next, please. Of course, a health information card. This is an item also on the list. You can put what kind of medications or the amount of medications that you are taking on this card. It has room for the name of the medication, the dosage, how often that you take it, and the purpose. So you can fill this out with the information that you have. These cards are available at the Baltimore City Health Department and elsewhere. And if you need to get somewhere, quite welcome to contact the health department and we can mail some to you. Also, keep a version of this on your refrigerator. Also keep one in your bag. So in the event you have to go to the doctor, you already have your medications filled out. Next, please. Like I said, we already went over this, keeping a copy on your fridge. And like I said, keep a copy on your fridge in case medical personnel have to come in your home. They will look on your fridge and they will also take the one off your fridge if there's one there. So that's a good idea to put one there also. Next, please. Also, write down frequently called numbers. I know we have these awesome cell phones. However, they do break. The batteries do run down. So you want to make sure that you're writing those important numbers down. When emergency events happen, unfortunately, sometimes even the numbers that we call on a regular, sometimes grow wings and fly away. So you want to write them down in a safe place, keep one in your kit, and place one on your fridge, keep one in your emergency bag, in your pocketbook, or wherever it is that you need to keep one in the event something happens to your cell phone. Next, please. And also, you want to make sure that you have a manual can opener. If you have one that runs by electricity, when the lights go out, it will not work. So you want to make sure you have a manual can opener. Flashlight. If you have quite a few rooms in your house, you want to make sure that if at all possible, you keep a flashlight in each of those rooms. You just never know which room you're actually going to be in when the lights go out. A radio, and you want to make sure that you keep extra batteries for that radio, and of course a first aid kit. So you want to make sure that you're adding these items ahead of time so that you will have them when you need them. Also, I will also add, keep a carbon monoxide detector, have more than one. I had a scary event last year where one of my carbon monoxide detectors started going off. So I thought something was wrong with the detector, actually. I said, what is wrong with this carbon monoxide detector? And I will include, at that time, I did start getting sleepy. I went upstairs to get something, and the carbon monoxide detector upstairs started going off also. So, of course, right away, I called the fire department. They came out and they told me there was a leak. Some stuff was coming out of the stove and from down in the basement. So I am so glad that I have more than one. I encourage you to have more than one of these. So when one goes off, yes, it's time to call the fire department. And it goes off, definitely there's something wrong. So I encourage you to have more than one of these. Next, please. And of course, if you have hearing aids or other devices, you want to make sure that you are making a plan for them, and also have an alternate place you can get your special need items in the event of an emergency. Next, please. And of course, important documents. You want to keep one with you, place one in your emergency kit, keep one on your fridge. Also, you want to make sure that you are charging your cell phones each night. Keep an extra charger with you if at all possible. Cell phones may not work in a large-scale emergency, so you want to make sure that you know where landline is in case you do not have one of your own, and of course where there's a payphone. Yes, there are still payphones. I was over at Cold Spring when I was catching the metro one day, and someone was actually on it, so it was working. So yes, there are still payphones around. Next, please. Keep a copy of important documents and a list of important phone numbers. We can't state this enough. Make a copy of them, your important documents. Give one to a trusted friend or relative, and put another in a safe place for retrieval later. Determine how you will contact friends and loved ones in the event of an emergency. So you want to make sure that you have a meeting place in the event of an emergency, because we just never know what's going to happen next. But we do know if we live long enough, the next event will happen. Next, please. And finally, brain teasers and other items. You want to add some crossword puzzles, cards, coloring books, any other item that you may want to use, because a little distraction goes a long way during an emergency. Adding these items ahead of time means that you do not have to wish that you had them later. And of course, one thing I did not mention is store a little cash in your emergency for emergency events, because if the lights go out, I know we use those ATM cards all the time. The ATM cards will not work if the lights go out. I remember a few years ago when we had the derecho and the lights went out in a lot of the stores, including some of the 7-Elevens and so forth. I had to have cash when I went to some of these places. The lights were not working. So you want to make sure that you are storing away even some small bills. I throw coins in a jar when I go home. So if you have change, you have dollar bills, just store them ahead of time in the event of an emergency. you'll have some cash to use. Next, please. And finally, be safe. Be aware of your surroundings. Keep cell phone use to a minimum if you are walking outside. Know where exits are when you go into a building. Know alternate routes to and from your destination. In the event there's some kind of flood event or some other event, you want to be able to get to wherever it is you're going. If you're going home, you want to make sure that you have alternate routes. And do this ahead of time. You don't want to wait till an event happens before you try to find an alternate route to your home. So do these things ahead of time. Next, please. And thank you very much for your time. Molly, if you have anything to add, please, you're quite welcome to do so. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you inviting us.
All right. Thank you, Bridget. And thank you to all of the speakers today. If anyone has any questions, there are no questions yet. If you have a question now, if you can put it into the chat. I just want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you to the speakers. Thank you for all the great information. All of the speakers, the agencies that they're with, and their email addresses, they're all listed on this page in front of you. If you're more comfortable directing a question directly to one of them, obviously that is something that you can do as well. And seeing no questions, we will not have the Q&A session. Oh, there's one question that just came in. So this is from Ashley, and she said, many people are unemployed or concerned about financial security in the near future due to COVID. What can they do to be more prepared for urban flooding? And this isn't directed at any specific panelist. Does anyone want to take the question?
I guess I could start and then others can chime in. So my name's Kevin Wagner with Maryland Department of Environment. It's certainly a tough situation out there, and having to deal with multiple issues while you're dealing with your own personal financial issues could add a lot of strain and stress. But I would say, do kind of like an evaluation of your home, the place where you're living. Are there some simple things that you can do that maybe would help to reduce your risk? Maybe getting some things off the floor. Maybe you already have a shelving system, and instead of keeping important things on the bottom shelf, maybe move them up to the top shelf. If you have a basement, maybe instead of storing a lot of things in the basement, bring it to a higher floor level. So I guess some no cost, simple things like that would be my sort of first reaction. And then based on, additional willingness or enableness to invest in other financial mitigation, there's all kinds of other things that we had talked about earlier.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Does anybody want to add?
Hi, I was not one of the speakers, but this is Joy Hatchett with the Maryland Insurance Administration. And in these tough economic times, people are generally, you're looking for ways to cut how you spend your money. And one of the things that I always caution people, before you miss a payment on an insurance policy or on your mortgage, get in touch with the particular company, tell them the issues that you're having, and see if you can work out an agreement with the company to either delay or reduce those payments. Because that's the last thing that you want, is to miss a payment on your mortgage and end up in foreclosure. I mean, it may be inevitable, but if you could feasibly work something out with the company or work something out with the insurance company for a period of time, it's one of those things that would be a step in decreasing the amount of expenses for that period.
Thank you, Joy. Does anyone else want to comment on the last question?
I was just going to add one more thing. This is Kevin again. An idea that has come up before that I thought was just really great. I think it was Maryland Emergency Management Agency. I heard this is just get to know your neighbors, exchange phone numbers. Today, we spend a lot of time on our mobile devices and we're kind of in virtual world, but getting to know your neighbors, reaching out to each other for help, and don't be afraid to ask for help.
Thanks, Kevin.
Can I also add something as well? I'm sorry, this is Kiana.
Go ahead.
So also too, one thing that we stress about disaster preparedness is having that inventory list of everything that you have inside your home. Just knowing what you have, taking pictures, documenting that stuff. Because a lot of times what we find is when a disaster occurs, a lot of people are pressured to come up with this information on the spot. So just knowing your insurance information and the stuff that you have, your content as well, is important.
Thank you, Kiana. We have another question from Ashley. Can you sign up for Be More alerts if you work in Baltimore but do not live in Baltimore?
That's correct. You can sign up for Be More alerts if you do work in Baltimore City, and you can also download an app for that as well, for Be More alert.
Thank you, Crystal.
Sure.
Patty, I just posted a question that came in to me as the host privately so that you could see it.
I got it. The slides and recording. Thanks. All right, and then we have one more question. Somebody just asked, will we receive a copy of the slides? And so the slides and the recording are going to be posted to our website, www.insurance.maryland.gov, and it will be there within the next few days. There is one more question. Is there an issue with trash going into the sewer that clogs drains, and what can we do besides what myself and neighbors do on our block to get this issue resolved? And it's not the street cleaning truck. They do little to no cleaning at all.
So in that front, yes, trash can make urban flooding a worse problem, can exacerbate the level of flooding. So if there is, like, my advice would be that if there is a forecasted storm, if you see that there is trash covering the inlets, you can always call the 311 service and report the issue. They are usually pretty responsive in going to sites and cleaning out any trash that is covering the inlets.
Thank you. Well, again, thank you, everyone. Seeing no more questions, I'm just going to say thank you to all the speakers today for your great information. And for the attendees, I encourage you to talk to your friends and family about the information that was presented today. And again, the recording of this event will be on the Maryland Insurance Administration's website as soon as possible. Thank you all for attending, and we hope to see you at our events in the future.